I would say my highest level advice, before it was Google, but it truly is just leverage ChatGPT. Like literally just write as much as you can about your company, drop it into ChatGPT and be like, hey, here's a base of what I'm actually trying to do. I'm at a stage now where I'm trying to go out and raise capital.
Hey you, okay, we have got an amazing guest today. We've got Keir Dillon, and he drops so much good knowledge today. He is going to talk about how to prep for investor meetings, how to casually approach investors, which is just, he has some great nuggets there, the role that mentors have played in his life and how he found them, which is incredible. And he's going to talk about the headphone company that he co-founded and how they got into Apple and other retailers, which is no easy task. So a little background on Keir. He was in the action sports industry, pro snowboarder, on the Burton team, traveled all over the world. And then he co-founded this women's fashion-forward headphone company called Friends. They had beautiful product. They went through multiple rounds of funding and incubators. As I said, got into Apple. They also got into Best Buy, Nordstrom's. They were shipping internationally. And he has since transitioned into raising capital for a beer startup called Open. And I absolutely love what they're doing. I'm so excited to be able to share what they're doing. They are dedicated to championing inclusiveness, diversity, and just overall being a good human that accepts all people, which every company should do, right? So I've known Keir for a while. He is a great guy, amazing energy, and he is sharing so much good stuff with us today. So let's dive in. Okay, Keir, hello. Excited to see you. Keir Dillon, good to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Good to see you as well, Jalen.
So we have had slightly similar paths for kind of a long time, even though I didn't know you a long time ago. We both had a stint with Burton, you could say. Yours was way cooler than mine. We can say that. But we definitely both grew up in that snowboarding world and then ventured from there into entrepreneurship and have had some crazy similar experiences along the way. So it's actually really fun to reconnect and see where we're at now.
Hey, man. No, we're both a glutton for punishment, clearly.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, let's, I want to get into actually, I'd love to start off with just what you're doing right now, because I think that having a business with a purpose is even more important going forward in these days. And it's something I actually regret. Like, I had a purpose around health and stuff like that, but I feel like I could have had even a deeper purpose. And even in my business right now, I feel like I should have a deeper purpose. And what you guys are doing is so amazing. So if you don't mind, I'd love for you to just share kind of what you're doing now. And then we'll get into all the fun stuff about all the times you've raised money and all the crazy things you've gone through. But give us an overview of what you're working on now.
Awesome. Yeah. It's a beer brand. It's called Open Beer. As the name suggests, we're open to all people, all things, all beliefs. It's like more of a contemporary culture focused beer brands, taking inspiration from skateboarding, art, music, pop culture, but really leaning into the open aspect of it, right? Race, gender, creed, just, treating people like good humans. Anchored in LA, downtown is where our base is right now. We partnered with New Belgium Brewing. They're like the Patagonia of beer. So again, do good for the world and people. They're an amazing partner, and really just trying to bring a new energy into the beer space. Right? It's outside of craft. It's really owned by a large conglomerates, and a lot of those brands are kind of old and old values. So for us, we're just trying to add a new spirit and new language and kind of change the symbol for when you're holding a beer, what that could actually stand for. So our mission is to instigate contemporary culture and diversify the beer business ecosystem. Out of the 10,000 breweries, only 1 or 2% are Black owned. So it's a multicultural brand, and yeah, just, diving in, trying to create some noise and do things differently, right? Like just the way that we communicate with people, the audience we're going after. How can we actually bring a new lens into beer?
Amazing. I love it. That is incredible. So obviously I was in the alcohol industry dealing with a lot of the, a lot of the, stuff, we'll call it, in that industry. And, 10, 15 years ago, it was very much a, older, white-haired kind of, vibe. Every time I went into a distributor's office, a lot of the retailers, same way, just kind of old, stuck in their ways. And a lot of them were like, who would want a lighter, healthier wine? Now it's like an $11 billion category. So are you seeing that has shifted a little bit? Like with all that's gone on in the past few years, is that industry finally coming around also a little bit, or is it still a little bit of a push and a struggle?
I would say the intentions are there to switch, right? Even I think it had already started, but obviously George Floyd many years ago, kicked that into high gear. But it's hard to change when the people at the top are a certain way, because they're not going anywhere, right? Like they're like, cool, we could try to diversify our teams, but it's usually lower level, and it's they kind of have their C-suites, they have their places there. So I think there's a desire for it, but it's just really hard in a practical manner to do so. It's also a very kind of closed loop circuit for the large players, right? Whether that's the brand side, distribution side. It's really hard to get in there. So even for us, through our partnership with New Belgium, that kind of at least gives us an in, where from just a capital perspective, they're our contract manufacturer. We're able to bypass at least one big piece of it, and then also leverage them for relationships and trying to crack the code and get in there. And because we're minority owned, and because we're building it right from the way that we hire people and the way that we, everything that we do, that piece where if you could actually create the brand to be successful, that sort of an impact can really help change the industry. Even if it's a small little piece, it's from the inside up out, as opposed to, we hired this ambassador, or we, hired a marketing, low-level marketing person of color. Like if you actually want to create real change, it has to come from like generational wealth and actually building brands that have an impact. So that's really kind of the mission behind it.
That's great. Love that. And are you guys, so with alcohol and with a lot of products, there's a, kind of push it off the shelf through the distributor, or pull it off the shelf, from the end consumer, kind of pulling it through. And obviously you've got, so many connections and such a network, on the media side and everything. Are you tackling it both ways, or are you going after kind of one strategy or the other?
Yeah, I mean, it's split. Like you said, even all the owners that are coming into it are people that people of influence, people from the culture, at kind of any level. For us, it's more, do you culturally fit the brand, and then trying to build it up through that. And it's not like that model we invented, right? Even St. Archer did that a long time ago. It's more just the vision we have to apply that model. But yeah, from a brand perspective, obviously trying to grow the brand like a t-shirt company in a way, right? A shortcut for it is like if Supreme made a beer, hopefully it'd be open, is kind of like our way of going about it. So collaborations, people that we work with, where we show up in the market, really anchored into that culture. But as you said, it's alcohol. So 99.9% of the people walking in originally haven't heard of you or know who your people are. So it's like all POS. It's all like relationship building. It's all winning at market. Very ground attack, trying to scale really the unscalable, which is befriending every single point of distribution, whether it's a bar or a liquor store that you can. And then obviously you can get some scale with distributors, but it's still, that's the name of this game. At least for the time that we've been in it. I try to be a quick study, but definitely seems like it's won at that point of distribution.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, and what is your role currently? Because sounds like you are back in the funding seat. So yeah, give us a little on kind of what you're doing, what your role is right now.
Yeah, so I'm the managing director of the brands. I was brought into it about 6 months to a year after the ideation of it originally occurred. I do remember my last company. I was like, I'll never, occupy that seat again and go through that process, just because the stress and the chaos and all the getting punched in the face. And then a couple years later, it wasn't lost to me where I'm like, I literally said I would never do this again, and here I am. But it's fun. It's as you know, it's a gift and a curse in that sense, because it is such a life-giving thing that's inspiring and gives you so much energy, but also there's a lot of brain damage that happens, right? Like, even at my lowest of lows, I could get through good nights of sleep, and now things are going great, and I still wake up at like 3 or 4 every single morning. Right? So it's I guess you have to sign up for that sort of lifestyle, and it's it's I love it.
Yeah, no, and again, you guys are doing it for a great reason. So it's, that counts for a lot, right?
Amen.
So, okay, let's go into a little bit on kind of your background. And then I want to touch on, you brought up some good stuff earlier when we were talking about, how to prepare for investor meetings. I think you and I have both pitched to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, right? And I think we both believe in, having your stuff dialed, having your materials, having a team, definitely kind of going at it the right way. But give a little bit on your background, even way back. So I think your professional sports background, I'm sure, plays into a lot of the success that you've had in the business world. But just give everyone a little bit of a kind of background on that and your other venture.
Yeah. I grew up East Coast, was lucky enough to get into snowboarding back when you could kind of just get into it very easily. Ended up having a 15-year career there with Burton Snowboards, Nike, Pepsi. Was part of the inner workings of Burton Snowboards in their rider-driven program, so touched most products that went through the house. Me and 7 other people would meet multiple times a year, go over products and positioning and strategy and ads and like a lot of stuff that normally you wouldn't have exposure to. But Jake actually realized that if you want to connect with consumers, well, then bring people in that are at that level and let them actually have opinions of like what's cool, what's not cool. So even just from a philosophical how to run a business, that was always mind blowing because you're like, well, Jake, this is your company. Shouldn't you help choose what this is? And he's like, no, idiot, you're the one out there, speaking and selling the product. So from that, I also grew up, my parents were like entrepreneurish, I guess. I don't know. My dad was like the first minority sandblast company for Pennsylvania. My mom did like a Sanford & Son junk dealership that she still does to this day. So just not corporate. So after snowboarding, as you're snowboarding, you're like, oh, what am I going to do in life? You can only do, McTwist for so long. I'd always just had a passion like, oh, I'd like to do a company, whatever that meant, right? Like and this is 30 years ago. So there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't podcasts, there weren't ways to actually educate yourself at that level. It was more, maybe if you get lucky, you make some stickers and t-shirts. Towards the end of snowboarding, we did this company called Friends, and it was more just a movement of championing there's no I in Friends. We're snowboarders. Yeah, we're going to compete against each other, but let's actually like go to X Games and like be friends, right? If you beat me, it's not because, it's just, it's an individual sport. I compete against myself, and then the judges just let us know who did better. So the ideology of that was just at a time in snowboarding where it was getting very I-centric and we wanted it to be more collaborative. That took some weight, and we were like, oh, let's do a company. So we actually had at least a philosophical idea to start to build a product over. And through that process, I didn't really know anything, but again, I was kind of raised my hand like, hey, I can try to figure this out how to run it. Was really like, how do you find smart people to come in and help, right? How to lead, how to make a product, everything, right? And for me, mentorship is a massive piece of that. Of like, if you don't know nowadays, you can go online and figure it out. But it's also, there's a lot of really smart, great humans that see themselves in you that are like totally down to meet and just pour knowledge into you. And it's fun for them too because they've lived it, and they've if they're successful, that's like they know what you're up for or in for. So yeah, I've had a good journey in sports that led to the opportunity to build a company, and then through there, similar to you, went through the whole process and, got punched in the face and beat up, and we're here to talk about it.
Oh man. Yep. Multiple times, right? Both of us or speaking for myself. Very cool. Yeah. I think you guys had an amazing product. I do want to say I loved your headphones. I thought style was on point, I should say, and definitely unique and not an easy category to be in either, right? Like another one that is like hard to test. Like you can't, headphone booths are expensive, point of sale. So it's another one of those things like educating someone on something before they can, try it or something like that. Those products are always challenging, right?
Yeah. And this is, I would say as advice, it's like really understand your market, understand how difficult it is, right? Because there are some markets that are just easier than others. So headphones, like I said, it is probably one of the more nightmare ones because of cash and the way cash flows to your business. You finally find a manufacturer in China that's good. You place an order. That takes maybe 2 months, then a month on a boat. Then you get it here. Let's say you have retail set up like Nordstrom or, Apple, Best Buy, name your amazing partner. They get it. They still don't want to pay you for another price 45 days, which really means they'll pay you in like 60 or 90. So like now you're stretched out 7 months where you place the PO until you actually get the money back. In the meantime, you're actually trying to run your operations and pay people. So those sort of things I didn't understand. I didn't understand actually, even with a great partner in China, that you have to basically have someone that lives there and goes in every single day and make sure that they're doing what they say they're going to do. Our manufacturer was innovation. They do Beats by Dre. They do Apple. They invested in our company. And it's still, we had to have someone on the ground there. So I think it's those sort of dynamics of, yes, we had an amazing product that was geared towards women in 2011 in the headphone space. So all the gift guides and all Apple was our first partner. They saw the designs, like these were amazing to tap our population. It totally makes sense. They brought us in all doors. But at the time, women weren't waking up and going, I need to buy a pair of headphones. Like in our pitch decks, we were still trying to convince people that people were going to carry phones around, right? It wasn't just on an airplane type of thing. So I call those like false truths of like, know your market, know, it's like, yeah, you can get all this press, but if it's not converting because people aren't looking for the product, then who cares? So I think as you're looking at your idea, like you said, is it something that you can test quickly? Can you test it with ads? Can you actually test a product that's differentiated enough? Maybe just through like artwork, and then let's say it was a shirt later is cut and sew, but like, how do you get to the points where you can actually have problems to solve and not burn cash getting there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's expensive to educate the consumer and
and yourself, right? Like
and yourself, yeah.
Not your first entrepreneurs, and even after you've done it a lot, like it's just they're learning new stuff all the time, and each one of those learnings is expensive.
Yep, totally. Let's go into kind of that fundraising piece and pitch decks and stuff like that. So, were you, I guess just what's your take on that? Like, what's your approach to prepping for an investor meeting and, having the materials that you need to convey, what you guys are doing, what you're trying to do and where you're going and all that stuff?
Yeah. So I think before you get to the investor meeting, you have to have like the fundamentals defined, right? Like what's the vision? Like, what's your plan? What's your why? What's the financials look like? Like, where are you today? Where are you trying to actually get to? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Like, what in the hypothetical nature of the funding, like, what are they funding? It's like, I need you to fund to get a prototype built because I believe once we get a prototype built, we can then take that and get more money. But like these benchmarks that you're funding money to. So I think it's one, articulate your company in a way that people will be excited about it. I think there's great templates now. If you, Google pitch deck, or if you go to like Slidebeam, they have amazing templates as well. But like, have the 12-page slide deck that forces you to think through all of the pieces, right? Like, what's the problem you're solving? What's the solution, right? Like, what is the product? What's your go-to-market plan, right? Like, just do all the work. Because if you don't do all the work, maybe you have a friend that knows someone that's awesome, and you get the meeting and you go in there and you're like, hey, I got this great idea. And you're like, cool. I hear these all day long. So I think the first step is just having your stuff together. And whether it's listening to your podcast, whether it's going on other people's, it's just like, do the work, leverage ChatGPT, right? Like, hey, what do I need to do for a 12-page pitch deck, right? Like it's there, it works. And getting that to a position where you believe it too, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm raising money right now, and it's when you're taking other people's money, like the level of responsibility hits you like a ton of bricks, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, you're the one going back to them and telling them it didn't work. And even if they're rich or not, it's just like, usually the people that have more money care less than actually your friends and family that it's meaningful to. So it's for yourself to be able to speak confidently to it and passionate about it. You have to first convince yourself and have your friends poke holes in it and defend all that to get to a place where you can actually then take a meeting and show up prepared. So I think, yeah, a typical meeting, I'm doing them all the time now. There are also stages, right? Like a first one may be a quick meet and greet. A lot of times I'll jump on for a 30-minute Zoom, and it's just, we'll run through the pitch deck. If it's not an investor, usually I'll run them through the presentation myself and kind of speak to it. And from there, it's just like, hey, does this sound like something of interest? If it is, then we can have further conversations, dig into the financials, dig into like more things. But you don't want to waste someone's time if they don't like, if like, you know what, alcohol doesn't seem for me, or like whatever it is. If the person's more sophisticated investor, then I just send the deck to them because they see them all the time, and they can just quickly be like, oh yeah, the market's too small, or it's too big, or like they have all their reasons why they invest or don't invest. So I guess number 2 is know your investor, right? Who are you actually speaking to? What level? Are they a brand person? Are they a numbers person? In tailoring the way that you're articulating your pitch to that. A numbers guy doesn't want to hear brand stuff for 25 minutes in a 30-minute conversation, right? And I know that because I've done that, and I could, like, you could see it on their face. They're like, yeah, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And then also just having, if it's you by yourself, then you just got to know your stuff. If it's you when you have an accountant, or if it's you when you have another partner, leveraging your partners that have those skill sets. I think in friends, I had great partners during the pitch process. I wasn't always leveraging them, right? Just had a call this morning, and we had our bankers and strategists on, and it's like, I'd already had a pre-meeting. So this was more of a follow-up of like digging into people that actually know the alcohol space from like an investment vehicle. I can't speak to that because I didn't have 19 exits in the last 60 months, like the person that was on the call, right? So again, just leveraging those sort of talents if you have it. And it doesn't have to be super high level too. You could be an e-com and just have a friend that's really good at it, that's, down to help you. So yeah, during the conversation, read it, try to see if they're interested or not. As you're talking to them, always do Zoom calls, have their attention. And then of course, everything is in the follow-up, thanking them for their time, trying to get another meeting, just delivering on the promises that you have. I think a lot of business is just good human common sense, understand that the other person on the end, if they've given you a meeting, they're interested, or they like you enough to take it. And at the end of the day, it's their money. If the vehicle makes sense, great. And if it doesn't, great. But like, I look at it right now for open, where I don't want later, if it is successful, I don't want someone to come up and be like, dude, you didn't even tell me about this. Right? Because a lot of times you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to pitch them. I'm kind of scared. It's like, hey, it might work. It might not. At the end of the day, right? The stats are the stats. The numbers aren't always looking good, but you can stack the deck in your favor. And if it does work, like Viore up in Encinitas, it's got valued at $4 billion. I know people that literally put in like 50 grand that are like multi-millionaires, right? So
That is crazy.
if that founder didn't reach out to a friend that in the beginning, who knows? So I think it's all how you frame it up too when you're taking these meetings. And then even just fundamental small stuff like show up with a smile, show up ready, like just the energy is important, right? Like I had a coach before, and he was always just like, dude, just be thinking good thoughts that comes through, and 80% of the nonverbal, right? Like all the little small stuff. Yeah, I don't know. And I guess hold them loosely, right? If you're going to be successful, you're probably going to have 100, 150 meetings. So like, just get through the first ones, maybe burn some of the lower level ones, and, get your chops going before you like take that one banger meeting that you have access to.
Yeah. Wow. That was a lot of good wisdom right there. Circling back real quick to the business plan, it drives me nuts. I feel like I hear this pretty often too, where people are like, you don't need a business plan. And even if no one's going to read it, I think just thinking through, and again, you being confident in the knowledge on the market and the industry and having those answers, like nobody, you might have, nobody ever reads it, right? But you need that knowledge and to feel confident. So I am totally with you there. Go ahead.
You can't write a true pitch deck without actually doing all the work that it takes to write a business plan, right?
Totally.
Like the same thing, like, cool, your financial snapshot that's this big actually takes a whole model, but to do the model correctly of like, what's the unit cost? What are you selling them per door per month? How many doors do you have, right? Like all the pieces that allow you to create a financial model is a business plan, just expressed through numbers. Just like a business plan, right, is all the words that then gets disseminated down to 12 slides. So yeah, people don't need to read that because they can actually extract it from those financials in the pitch deck, where if you haven't done the work, they're going to extract that you didn't do the work.
Yep. That's a great point. Yeah, I love what you said too about, that is such a great perspective to just think that, what if you didn't ask them and they'd be bummed down the road? And I think too, it's all in how you ask people, and there's a million different ways to do it. Question for you, because I feel like I remember doing this, like tweaking my pitch deck a million times. So are you actually going in and tweaking your pitch deck depending on who the investor is, or do you mostly have one that's kind of like one size fits all? Because I think that's something people probably want to. I feel like I used to tweak mine a lot.
Yeah. No, and I think before I used to do that a lot, and I think before that's because there wasn't. I think it's good templates to reference, right? Like now you can and I think if you look at like the Airbnb ones or like the Uber ones you can find online, like I think those are super high level because that was like Uber friends and family. But I think where ours is now, I can just tell the certain slides like you just don't dig into, right? It's like, here's the size of the market. If it's someone that understands alcohol, I don't need to dive into the white space and how big it is here and how we're going to grow. It's just like, yeah, you already know this. Next slide, right? It's like where are the points of differentiation that matter for the person that you're speaking to. But I like anchoring into just one that I customize how fast I go through it so that my brain's not having to, or just the back end, like you're saying, like, oh, do I have the right slide deck before this meeting? And just, I think simple is better. And then investors also understand, right? It's like, if you go faster a slide, they understand because they get it. Or if the numbers, like even always tweaking with the numbers I used to do of like keeping up, it's like, hey, we're up or we're down by X amount and here's why, right? And here's what we've done to fix it. Like, I don't need to go change the model and mess up my like remembering of what our numbers are. Everyone's different, right?
No, that totally makes sense. So yeah, especially if you're just, pushing through, talking to a lot of people, you don't even have time to, necessarily do that all the time. What's your strategy right now for kind of talking to new, investors? Or, you have a huge network. So I imagine, you've got a lot of people to talk to. And then obviously you've got, with everybody who has founded the company. So what's your approach right now? How are you kind of tackling that?
You mean as far as getting a meeting, I guess.
Yeah.
Right?
In terms of just kind of approaching, pitching it to new people.
Yeah. 90, I guess all of the calls are just soft warm leads, right? We are in market, which before we were in market, it was a little bit more difficult because like, hey, we're working on something. It's like a super idea. But even that, it's just, you know what you're building and you know the people that would care about it. So for us, it's a multicultural beer brand that's representative of skateboarding and art and music. So people that we know that either are associated with art, music, skateboarding, street culture, streetwear, especially if they're, of any color, then it's like, hey, like literally there's no beer brands that are owned by people of color. Maybe there's like a few, right? So it's just, and not even that, then it's just like, but let's build something through our culture. Why do people come and attach themselves to our culture? Why not actually build one from within? So if anyone cares about that, then hey, it's just like, hey, we're doing a beer brand. You want to talk about it? It's literally that simple, right? It's like, we're working on a project. Thought you might be a good person to check, to hear kind of a pitch. If you're open to it, great. If not, no big deal at all. Like I just try to hold it as loosely as humanly possible. Number one, because people can just feel it, but also two, I think it makes it easier for you as the person that feels like I need to go get some money, right? And it's like it's the person you're talking to is a smart, educated person that worked hard for that money, or even if they didn't, like, they understand their options. Go do Bitcoin or go invest in the stock market, or like, hey, I want to support someone because actually I just like supporting and being a part of small businesses. Or there's usually a passion point that actually doesn't make sense at this level of investing into a company of like where your money comes from. That's also the weird thing, right? It's almost all emotional, unless you're kind of getting into more like higher level investors. But even then, like we had two billionaires that invested into friends, and both of them, it was kind of outside their normal investment thesis. They just kind of liked us, liked people on the team and what we were trying to do. Like, but there was no real win for them there. They're already billionaires.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why we just did a story, like telling your story episode. And I think it is so much a numbers game in that sense, like, and holding it loosely for that reason. And you don't know where people are at too, right, in their life, or what investments they've just recently made, or there's so many factors. So, but I agree with you. I think it is very much an emotional decision, in that early stage. And so it's just kind of finding those people who are excited to latch on and, be a part of it kind of thing. So that's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah. And I think on the right, a lot of your listeners, it's idea to like doing it, right? Like, I think that's like the sweet spot. And I think for me, that when I think about whether it's open or I think about even friends, it's like doing the work from the initial idea will build your own confidence. Trying to also make sure that you can articulate it. So again, go through all the frameworks of pitch decks and stuff, elevator pitches, right? Who's your customer? What's their pain point? Like those things. But also branding matters too, right? Like spend a little bit of money, or work with somebody, or get a friend that that can like help build a simple website, or like these, like the entry point now is so low to look good and professional, that like also spend that time getting it to that first kind of stage, so that when somebody hears the idea, because everyone has ideas, right? They're like farts in a way, like cool. Like, I mean, I used to keep a journal of ideas and I stopped, because it's like the ideas flow, like, and an idea is not special. It's, will you actually take the idea and actually turn it into something? You become actually the special sauce of it, because you actually give it life and legs. So yeah, I just encourage anyone that has an idea, go through the structures, and then also just start like throw a logo at it, even though people are like, logo's not important, but it's like, it just makes it feel more real. Like it's amazing what some font and a little squiggly line and some things will actually do. You're like, oh, that looks good, right? And then now it has an energy and a life of its own around it. I remember my wife was working on a beauty brand. She's an energy healer, and same thing. We threw like some logo and some font at, and like you could see it. It's like, oh, this is real. And it's like, it's no more real than it was 10 minutes ago, but now it feels real. So,
yep. Yeah. Oh my God. And it's so easy to get stuff like that done now. It's like, yeah, it does not take a lot to do a simple website. It's like very, very doable. And I think just showing too that you made the effort, right? That's half of it.
Yeah, or just being resourceful, right? Like depending on the level of your raise, right? There's usually skill sets that you're trying to lean into that give you a unique and unfair advantage. Because if not, then why invest in you, right? That's also another thing as you're like trying to portray this, is like, what's your special sauce in this given category, right? Because almost no matter what the product is, there's other competitors out there, right? So it's like articulating, hey, here's the true pain point. Here's our special sauce. Here's why we believe there's an actual chance for it to work.
That's awesome.
Leaning into that.
Yeah. Let's go back to kind of the first time you were raising money. And I'm sure it factors in now too. I think at any stage of our life, we always need advice, and, just there's so much to learn, right? I've learned it never ends, right? So, but going back, I think, for me, I was new to the industry. I had no experience. So I really needed to find some people who knew what they were talking about in the alcohol space. And I think for you going from, snowboarding into business, what did you do to try to kind of surround yourself with mentors or people who could give advice, and, just to kind of have that soundboard as you're going through the process?
Yeah. So the first kind of real piece that we had was, my former team manager. We'd brought him on as like a partner, and he had grown brands. He worked at Burton Snowboards. He was part of Gravis and the other brands that they had done. So like, I knew that he understood at least that market. And even when we brought him on, that's before we decided to do headphones. It was more like, hey, we have this idea that's this mission and vision, and we want to attach a product to that to actually give it legs to move, so that the mission can be more than just an idea. From that, once we decided on headphones, he'd actually reached out to the former president of Burton Snowboards. It was like, hey, like, it's an athlete-backed company. Do you have any time to kind of donate to, help mentor us? And it just so happened that for him, he had changed and he was getting into private equity, and he was kind of new to it. So he had a lot of time. So I ended up basically getting like many, many, many hours a week for multiple years by just like industry genius.
Wow.
It was just from asking, right? And it's like, to this day, he's changed my life. And we're good friends, but it's like, it just was a circumstance for him that he had time in his life, right? So I think reaching out to people, as you shared, is everything. Even just if someone reached out to me now, it's like, cool, like I don't have time to do it. Like I don't take that as a negative. It's still a compliment that you would even ask, right? So I think, again, it's like this idea of being nervous about these asks that you have. It's in anyone that's successful has asked a lot, right? You can't do things without other people's help. It's that simple. So that's another reason why it's actually easy to ask people for help respectfully, right? And if they don't have time, then no big deal. Again, hold it loosely. But it's everything. Like even back to headphones, if I had talked to someone that really knew the industry, they might have been like, hey, idiot, this is a really hard industry. Here's why. And I hope that it wouldn't have deterred me, because in the beginning, you're like, I'm doing it, right? But I probably would have structured the way that I ran the company differently. I would have paid more attention to our balance sheet so that we could actually get money later that wasn't from an investor and was more institutional, like bank style, or like these things that I just didn't know. Same thing, our first load of product, 700 grand, we worked with the manufacturer that said they could do custom products, which they couldn't. And if you looked at the product, it broke. Like literally you like looked and it's like, oh, cool. The microphone just fell off. And that was 700 grand of just raised capital.
Oh my
So
God.
that throws off everything as well. Right. Or even just selling into Apple. Like that was our first customer. We had a $1.5 million PO and it was amazing. We're like, oh, we were raising money against it, but we shipped it in. We didn't do any channel marketing. We didn't launch the brand to the day it showed up at retail and expected it to sell to a consumer that's never had a product really marketed to them. Right. So like maybe if we had like a retail specialist or like somebody that understood big box chain, they'd be like, hey, like it's cool you got a PO, but you have marketing set aside to channel market. Right. And again, it doesn't take, it's like literally a sentence that someone can change your life of, right? Like if they're an expert in it, they're like, oh, you're trying to do like e-com and you're trying to do XYZ. Did you check your margin structure? Whatever it is, right? Like it's these really simple things. But you have to put yourself out there to have the opportunity for people to pour into you. So yeah, mentors are everything. Lean into them as much as you can. And this is it back to like why it's important to have your stuff together and show you did the work and have it look nice so that they go, cool, you at least are trying. You're not there maybe, but let me help you.
Yep. Yeah, I think similarly, some of the best mentors I had, it started off with hey, do you just I admire what you've done. Do you have a few minutes to give me advice? And then that turned into another meeting. It wasn't this formal, like, will you be my mentor? It's just like, hey, would you mind giving me your 2 cents? Or, I'd love to see what you think. And then they either have the time or they're just interested in helping you. And then, they answer the phone next time again. So yeah, I think that's definitely a good way to go about it. I also was in a similar situation where I wish I had more mentors at that time in the alcohol industry specifically. Like I did have a few, but I think they were more salespeople who were kind of interested in working with us versus people who'd completely been there and done that with their own alcohol companies. I didn't really have that. And that could have been instrumental in making some big shifts earlier on that would have set us on a different path. So I think that's super important. I think a lot of perspectives is good, but making sure you have some in the industry, like specifically that you're in, of those people, like you said, who've been there, done that kind of thing is, man, that's important. Yeah.
Well, especially at the high level, strategy is everything, right? Like, are you direct to consumer? Are you leveraging retail? Are you, for alcohol, is it self-distro? Is it distribution partner? Do you have it in there, right? Like these like seismic shifts that are only a few words, but it dictates a different outcome, right? Self versus distributor. But even mentorship, right? We reconnected and kind of really became friends through SDSI, which you were donating your time. And we went through as a young brand that was trying to get our stuff together. So I think you can reach out to people. You can also look for incubator programs, or just, if you're in San Diego, a local program like SDSI, which is a, sports driven San Diego based startups. So there's, I think, endless ways you can connect with people. You just got to do it.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, that's a great program. I loved working with SDSI. It was super fun. Very cool. Okay. Well, this has been great. We could chat about this stuff for like hours, I feel like. What else, anything else? Someone is going out thinking about raising money for the first time. Any other thoughts on just kind of your advice, or any other topics that you think worth chatting about?
I would say my highest level advice, before it was Google, but it truly is just leverage ChatGPT. Like literally just write as much as you can about your company, drop it into ChatGPT and be like, hey, here's a base of what I'm actually trying to do. I'm at a stage now where I'm trying to go out and raise capital. Can you formulate or you could actually then say, write me a prompt that will best set me up to have you help me raise money. What are the questions I should be asking you, right? Take that and then plug that back in. It's high level, but there's still, from a framework and structure perspective, it's just so good, right? Like there's stuff that even like I'll lean into it for leadership and be like, oh yeah, or just whatever. Because from a framework, it's there. And the more information you give it, the more that it can tailor back. So I would say if you're raising money, check that box at least, right? Like ask ChatGPT how to prepare for an investor meeting, and describe your investor, right? Describe what they're about and what they're going to, look for. And it will just spew it all back. So I think this day and age, that's your best friend on so many things. And then really for what I like humans is a human can really look at your strategy, like you said, especially if they're in market, and they can offer really nuanced, impactful stuff. Or they can be like, hey, you got to talk to so-and-so. Like even our intro to Apple was a friend was like, hey, I know one person at Apple. I literally have no idea what they do there. They ended up being the head of all headphone buying at the time. Right.
Well, actually, yeah, I wanted to ask you that. I meant to, because I think that is a question people have a lot of. How do you pitch to retailers? Because just as important as pitching to investors, it's like the whole other half of the job is pitching, if you're consumer products, right, is pitching to retailers. So tell us a little bit about your experience there, and whether it's headphones or beer, what kind of strategies do you have if you've got this, like, we got to get into that retailer? How do you approach that?
I forget what course I was watching that said this, but for sales related stuff, mine is always, it's the who, not the how. Like, I just know that by nature, I'm not a great salesperson at that level. So I always just try to find the best salesperson I can. That's not the answer really, but I'd say that is the answer, because if you just know that you're like, if you're not a numbers person and you're trying to raise money, you need a numbers guy, even if it's an a la carte service that is helping you or whatever. So at the highest level, it's that. Outside of that, understanding your partner, right? Understanding whether it's a Nordstrom or an Apple, understanding who their target consumer is, understanding what brands bring people into that store, understand that if they brought you in, they would be taking a huge risk. Understand, does your product really fill a void that exists in their store, right? So it's a lot of it is reconnaissance on the partner of like, hey, you guys have X type of customer coming there and they can't find X product, and we make X product and we think that they would love it. And here's some test cases that we did on our website, or whatever it is. It's more of you have to solve their pain point, right? This goes back to just, so I think from there, it's like when we pitched Apple, our salesperson, his tactic was a couple questions up front of like, oh, what's performing, what's not, because he doesn't want to start pitching a headphone that they're like, that's not performing for us, or like that's not a category we're focused on. So like he did it kind of live time. He was one of the smoothest salespeople I've ever encountered, but he just, you want to speak to the areas that they're trying to solve. So you got to figure out how to get that information and then position yourself as that solution. And then part of it too is companies want to run smoothly. So like a smaller company is sometimes better. Like, Apple, if their pegs are empty, then they're losing money. So if you're a company that can't service keeping inventory in stock, then they're out of business, right? So it's the sizing of your opportunity to the partner you're going after is important in being able to articulate that, hey, you can scale. Like, so for us in open beer, it's like New Belgium's our partner. They can scale to any size you want. They're the largest craft brewer in the US. And we have an agreement that we can turn on the juice anytime we want. So that's like a huge win, right? It could be whatever your product is, right? It could be similar situation, but part of the pitch is anticipating what their questions are going to be and having some really good answers for them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's super smart. I found too that, some retailers, I had to approach them, through 3 different people. And even though one department says no, like it doesn't mean you don't try 5 other departments, because a lot of times too, there's turnover and the person's gone and you're like, oh my, or, you never hear back and you're like, oh, they didn't want, and it's like, no, that person's been gone for, 3 weeks and you got to go to the next person. So,
or it just ended up in their inbox. Like,
yeah,
I'll dig through my inbox and be like, I literally spaced on this. I am so sorry. Right. So sometimes like, yeah, maybe your product was a good idea and you reached out and the person just had a bad day and they missed it. Right.
I think that's a really good point too for investors. Like when you're pitching, unless again, it's institutional, this pitch is such a small priority, for what they've got most likely going on in their career and life. And so just not taking it too personally, like if they did forget to get back to you and like you said, politely follow up and all that, because it's not like the most important thing. It's the most important thing for, us at that time, but not for them. So I think that's a good point too. Last quick question. So structure wise, I think you touched on a few things, but in the early stage, with friends or, with open, are you guys doing any kind of like, equity upfront in exchange for people coming on your team, shares, stuff like that? Or how are you getting people, how are you building your team? Is that a strategy you guys are using?
So the original founders obviously have equity. The employees that we have, we're giving equity to, but it wasn't like we're going after this A player and we need to have a crazy package for him. So actually, you know what I mean? So it's, in that sense, it's been nice because it's also tough to give someone equity that you haven't worked with or know, or like, right? Because then they're tied to brand forever. But we, similar to Belgium, we always want to make sure that everyone that's a part of it that has meaning in the brand is an owner of it. But I think erring on more simple, the better, right? Obviously, don't make promises you can't keep. But I think back to like a solid just hook of like the reason you're doing it in the person liking your spirit will get you pretty far, right? Down the road to then go, hey, you know what? You've actually had a ton of impact on this. I know we talked about this. Let's give you some ownership. But there hasn't been a lot. We have 2 board members that have some pieces. They are crazy powerful within the industry. So that just kind of made sense. But at Friends, we did more of the let's give equity to get people a part of it. But then they didn't stay with the company, right? It just, I don't know. It just, in hindsight, I don't know. I'm just trying to view like the right culture fit for this will get it. And they'll at least be willing to put in enough work to get us to like actually build together and then get to that point to honor that what they've contributed to the brand. But everyone's different, right?
Yep. No, I'm with you there. I feel like I gave that out a little too loosely the first time around. And then this time I've definitely been more cautious around that and just kind of, I think the weight have people prove themselves first. And then it's, perk, reward, bonus, like at some point along the way is definitely a smarter way. But it's not always. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do in the beginning, right? Too. So it's like, is what it is.
I think as a startup, it's so scrappy, right? It's such you're so not paying rack rate for stuff. You're so looking for favors. And even if you get like a decent amount of capital up front, you're still doing it that way. So I think having people involved that are involved for the mission and the vision and down for you and the culture, what you're trying to do is imperative, because if they want to check first day, then it's like, they're just gonna, you're not gonna be able to probably pay them, right? Because cash is always tight in the beginning. So I think that culture fit is everything. Whether it comes in a form of capital or cash, it's like, if their hands out day one, they might not be a perfect fit for like a true scrappy startup, unless you're talking like partnership, right? Like, hey, like, let's do this together type of trade of equity.
Yeah, makes sense. Very cool. Well, this is amazing. You have so much good knowledge. I love it. It's insane. Tell everyone where they can find more about what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in the alcohol space and want to have a conversation, I would say give me a phone call. Keir at openbrewing.com. You can go to our website, and it's just Keir at that website URL. But yeah, I'm always down for conversations, value add, and just even in what I've been preaching here. If it works, great. If it doesn't, great. Hopefully I made a new friend, right? It's literally that simple. And also, as I get older, you start to realize, like, we're on Earth a really long time. Like, you'll probably do lots of companies, right? Like, that's also the thing. Like, I remembered, I was like, oh, this is like the one company. It's like, dude, like, even the people that I know that have had crazy exits, like, they just get bored and want to do it again because they're insane and they want to, want the brain damage. So
I trip out on that, actually, because I'm like, I have no idea what I'm going to be doing 10 years from now. And that's so exciting. Like, I have no idea. I'm sure I will be doing something I can't even imagine right now, because that's kind of the way the decades have gone.
Amen. No, 100%.
Oh, very cool. Okay. And also, where can we buy open beer, just at least to be able to support on the retail shelf?
Yeah, so we're downtown LA focused right now, locking our distribution partner right now, and then branching into more of SoCal for summer and fall. Right now, if you just go to our website, but more local spots in downtown LA is really where we're focused right now.
Cool. Very cool. Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you, Keir. So good to see you and connect and catch up. So stoked for you guys, all the good stuff you're doing. It's awesome. Very cool.
Thank you so much. Excited to do as well. Appreciate it.